The last thing Rian remembered was the sound of metal tearing apart, and the flash of fire rushing across the control deck. His small human vessel had no chance against the Virai fleet. Their warships were massive, built like floating fortresses, and their weapons cut through shields like paper. He should have died in that battle. Yet, somehow, he woke up alive. When Rian opened his eyes, he found himself inside a dark chamber. The walls glowed faintly with a cold blue light, and the air smelled sharp, like metal and smoke. Shackles pressed against his wrists, not painfully tight, but firm enough to remind him he was a prisoner. The tall Virai guards stood near the door. Their armor was black with sharp edges, designed more to inspire fear than for protection. Their eyes glowed faint yellow, and they spoke to each other in a deep language that Rian could not understand. From the tone alone, he guessed they were mocking him. Humans feared the Virai across the stars. They were known as conquerors, warriors who believed mercy was weakness. Rian had heard stories how they enslaved or destroyed worlds, how their queen ruled with absolute power. Meeting one of them should have filled him with terror. And yet, as he sat there, he felt only a strange calmness. Panic would not help him survive. Moments later, the chamber door opened with a heavy sound. The guards stiffened and bowed their heads low. Rian lifted his eyes and saw her, the one they called Queen. She was taller than any human, her armor plated with silver and dark crimson. A crown of jagged metal rose from her headpiece, and her presence filled the entire room like a storm. Her eyes, bright as molten gold, fixed on Rian as if she could see through him. She was not just a ruler, she was a living weapon, a queen, born to conquer. The guards shoved Rian forward, forcing him to kneel. He stayed down, breathing slowly. Every other prisoner she had faced before him begged for their life or cursed her name. He had heard it in the whispers of survivors that no one left her chamber alive unless she wished it. Human, her voice rumbled, deep and steady. Her words carried a strange accent, but they were clear. You are the only survivor from your vessel. Do you understand where you stand? Rian raised his head carefully. He met her gaze, not in defiance, but without trembling. I understand, he said quietly. I stand before the one who commands victory. There was no flattery in his tone. He spoke the truth. She had won, and he was alive only because she allowed it. The queen's golden eyes narrowed slightly. She studied him as though he were a puzzle piece that did not fit. Your kind always spits venom. She said, some beg, some rage. None face me with such calm. Tell me, do you not fear death? I do. Rian answered simply, but fear will not change it. If I live, I will live. If I die, then that is the end. I can only choose how I stand in front of you. A silence filled the chamber. Even the guards seemed uncertain, shifting on their feet as if waiting for her command to strike him down. But no such command came. Serikna stepped closer. The weight of her presence pressed against Rian like a storm wind. She tilted her head, studying his calm face, his steady breathing. To her, he looked fragile. His body was thin compared to her warriors. His skin held no marks of battle, and yet his spirit did not bend. Finally, she spoke again. Strange, she murmured, her tone quiet but sharp. Perhaps humans are not as simple as I believed. With a sharp motion of her hand, she signaled. The guards, take him back. He will not die today. The guards looked at each other in surprise, but they obeyed. They dragged Rian back toward the cell chambers. As they pulled him away, he glanced once more at the queen. Her eyes were still on him, bright with curiosity. When the door closed, silence fell in her throne chamber. For the first time in many years, Queen Serikna felt unsettled. A human prisoner had faced her without begging, without rage, without fear. It was not strength in the way her people understood it was something else. Something she could not name yet. Rian's days on the Virai warship followed a strange rhythm. He was not treated like an honored guest, nor was he tortured like a hated enemy. Instead, he existed in a space between. A prisoner watched closely, given food and water, but always reminded that his life belonged to the will of Queen Serikna. The Virai guards often mocked him. They called him Fragile One in their language, a word Rian slowly learned by the way they laughed after saying it. They shoved him when he walked too slowly, gave him the hardest tasks when he was forced to clean or carry supplies, and left him with scraps at meals. Yet, Rian never cursed them. He never fought back. He simply did what he could, calmly and without complaint. One day, as he was guided through the lower chamber of the ship, he noticed a group of variety workers unloading heavy metal containers. These were not warriors, but laborers, smaller, thinner members of the species. One of them tried to lift a container that slipped from her grasp. It landed hard, nearly crushing her arm. The others laughed, jeering at her clumsiness. Without thinking, Rian moved forward. He knelt, placed both hands under the edge of the container, and helped her push it upright. His arms shook with the effort. He was far weaker than any variety, but he did not stop until it was steady. The worker blinked at him, her glowing eyes wide with surprise. The guards barked with laughter. Look at him, one sneered. The human helps the low-born. Does he think kindness makes him strong? Rian said nothing. He simply gave the worker a small nod, then stepped back into place. For him, it was natural. If someone needed help, he gave it. To the variety, it was foolish. What he did not know was that Queen Sarikna watched from above. A viewing platform overlooked the chamber, hidden by shadows. She had ordered the humans' tasks to be monitored, and now she saw something she had not expected. A human, weak and chained, helping a worker no warrior would have cared about. Later, Rian was brought again before the queen. This time, the throne chamber was quieter. The guards remained near the walls, but Sarikna spoke directly to him. I saw you today, she said, her golden eyes sharp. You aided one who was beneath even my notice. Why? Rian looked up at her, calm as always. Because she needed help. That is no answer, Sarikna replied, her voice colder. There was no reward. You gained nothing. Why waste your strength? Rian thought for a moment. Strength is not wasted when it eases another's burden, he said slowly. A small act can make a heavy day lighter. That is reason enough. The queen studied him for a long time. No variety would have spoken such words among her people. The weak existed only to serve. To show them kindness was to show weakness. Yet, here was a fragile human speaking as if compassion itself was strength. You confuse me, human. Sarikna admitted at last. My warriors believe cruelty builds power. But you act as though kindness is a weapon. Tell me, do you think mercy can win battles? Rian shook his head. Mercy doesn't win battles, but it wins trust, and trust can end battles before they begin. For the first time in many years, Queen Sarikna felt silence settle inside her like a weight. His words were simple, but they carried a strength different from blades or fire. She dismissed him quickly, not wishing to show her unsettled thoughts before her guards. Back in his cell, Rian lay awake, thinking of the queen. He did not know why she spoke to him, why she had spared his life when so many others had perished. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps something else. All he knew was that she watched him closely, testing him in ways he could not yet understand. Days passed, small tasks continued, and every time an opportunity arose, Rian helped where he could. When a young guard dropped his weapon during drills, Rian picked it up and handed it back without fear. When scraps of food were divided, he gave the larger share to another prisoner. Each act was small, almost invisible, but whispers began to move among the lower workers. The human was strange. The human was not cruel. The human gave what little he had, and above them all, the queen kept watching. She told herself it was only curiosity, that she studied him the way one studied an unusual creature. But deep within, she began to wonder, was there another kind of strength one her people had forgotten? For the first time, Queen Sarikna doubted the paths she had always believed in, and all because of a human who showed kindness where no one else would. Rian's days on the variety warship followed a strange rhythm. He was not treated like an honored guest, nor was he tortured like a hated enemy. Instead, he existed in a space between a prisoner watched closely, given food and water, but always reminded that his life belonged to the will of Queen Serikna. The Varai guards often mocked him. They called him Fragile One in their language, a word Rian slowly learned by the way they laughed after saying it. They shoved him when he walked too slowly, gave him the hardest tasks when he was forced to clean or carry supplies, and left him with scraps at meals. Yet, Rian never cursed them. He never fought back. He simply did what he could, calmly and without complaint. One day, as he was guided through the lower chamber of the ship, he noticed a group of Varai workers unloading heavy metal containers. These were not warriors, but laborers, smaller, thinner members of the species. One of them tried to lift a container that slipped from her grasp. It landed hard, nearly crushing her arm. The others laughed, jeering at her clumsiness. Without thinking, Rian moved forward. He knelt, placed both hands under the edge of the container, and helped her push it upright. His arms shook with the effort. He was far weaker than any Varai, but he did not stop until it was steady. The worker blinked at him, her glowing eyes wide with surprise. The guards barked with laughter. Look at him, one sneered. The human helps the low-born. Does he think kindness makes him strong? Rian said nothing. He simply gave the worker a small nod, then stepped back into place. For him, it was natural. If someone needed help, he gave it. To the Varai, it was foolish. What he did not know was that Queen Serikna watched from above. A viewing platform overlooked the chamber, hidden by shadows. She had ordered the humans' tasks to be monitored, and now she saw something she had not expected. A human, weak and chained, helping a worker no warrior would have cared about later. Rian was brought again before the queen. This time, the throne chamber was quieter. The guards remained near the walls, but Serikna spoke directly to him. I saw you today, she said, her golden eyes sharp. You aided one who was beneath even my notice. Why? Rian looked up at her, calm as always. Because she needed help. That is no answer, Serikna replied, her voice colder. There was no reward. You gained nothing. Why waste your strength? Rian thought for a moment. Strength is not wasted when it eases another's burden, he said slowly. A small act can make a heavy day lighter. That is reason enough. The queen studied him for a long time. No Varai would have spoken such words among her people. The weak existed only to serve. To show them kindness was to show weakness. Yet, here was a fragile human speaking as if compassion itself was strength. You confuse me, human. Serikna admitted at last. My warriors believe cruelty builds power. But you act as though kindness is a weapon. Tell me, do you think mercy can win battles? Rian shook his head. Mercy doesn't win battles, but it wins trust, and trust can end battles before they begin. For the first time in many years, Queen Serikna felt silence settle inside her like a weight. His words were simple, but they carried a strength different from blades or fire. She dismissed him quickly, not wishing to show her unsettled thoughts before her guards. Back in his cell, Rian lay awake, thinking of the queen. He did not know why she spoke to him, why she had spared his life when so many others had perished. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps something else. All he knew was that she watched him closely, testing him in ways he could not yet understand. Days passed, small tasks continued, and every time an opportunity arose, Rian helped where he could. When a young guard dropped his weapon during drills, Rian picked it up and handed it back without fear. When scraps of food were divided, he gave the larger share to another prisoner. Each act was small, almost invisible. But whispers began to move among the lower workers. The human was strange. The human was not cruel. The human gave what little he had died, and above them all, the queen kept watching. She told herself it was only curiosity, that she studied him the way one studied an unusual creature. But deep within, she began to wonder, was there another kind of strength one her people had forgotten? For the first time, Queen Serikna doubted the path she had always believed in, and all because of a human who showed kindness where no one else would. The Varai warship moved like a shadow across the stars. Its size alone made entire fleets retreat. Within its halls, silence and discipline ruled. Yet in the queen's throne chamber, Something unusual stirred. Queen Sarachna sat upon her high seat, her armor gleaming under the pale lights. Reports from her generals lay untouched. Maps of future conquests flickered across the wall screens. But her golden eyes were not on them. Instead, they rested on one thought: the human prisoner. Rian. He had done nothing extraordinary in the way. Her warriors defined greatness. He had not fought. He had not killed. He had not conquered. Yet his calm, his strange kindness, echoed in her mind. She told herself it was only curiosity, yet curiosity was a dangerous thing for a queen. That day, she commanded her guards, "Bring the human to me." The guards bowed and soon returned with Rian. His wrists were bound, but lightly now, for he had never resisted. He stood in the chamber, his posture straight though he was surrounded by enemies. Sarachna leaned forward. "Human," she began, her voice echoing, "you live among my people, yet you do not curse. You do not beg. Why?" Rian looked at her, his voice steady. "What would it change if I cursed or begged? It would only waste breath." The queen's lips curved in the faintest shadow of amusement. Few dared to speak to her so plainly. "Do you not despise me? Do you not hate the hand that crushed your vessel and ended your comrades?" Rian's eyes lowered for a moment. "I grieve them," he admitted softly. "But hating you will not bring them back. Hate builds nothing. It only burns." Those words struck her more sharply than any blade. To the Varai, hatred was fuel. Hatred sharpened warriors, drove armies, built empires. Yet here stood a fragile human who spoke as though hatred was nothing but ash. "You speak of strange things," Sarachna said. "Compassion, trust. Now you speak against hate itself. Tell me, human, what then is the strength of your people?" Rian thought carefully. "Humans are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We do not live as long as others. But we endure, and we endure best when we stand together. That is our strength." Silence followed. The queen studied him as though trying to break open his chest and see the truth of his heart. She found no fear in his eyes, no trembling in his voice, only certainty. Her generals shifted uneasily at the edges of the chamber. They did not like this conversation. To them, speaking so long to a prisoner was a waste of time, perhaps even dangerous. But Sarachna ignored them. "Endurance," she repeated slowly. "Strange, among the Varai. Endurance is born from conquest, but you claim endurance is born from unity. Tell me, human, do you believe such ideas could survive among my people?" Rian did not flinch at the challenge. "Every people can choose their path," he said. "Even yours, but only if they wish to." The queen's golden eyes narrowed. It was not defiance he offered her. It was truth, plain and sharp. She could not decide if it angered her or intrigued her. At last, she stood, her towering form casting a long shadow across the chamber. She circled him slowly, like a predator measuring prey. "You are either a fool," she said, "or you see something I cannot. Perhaps both." Rian gave a small shrug. "Maybe." Her guards stiffened, waiting for her wrath. None dared to speak to her with such plainness. But to their shock, the queen did not strike him down. Instead, she stopped in front of him, her eyes fixed on his calm face. "You interest me, human," she admitted at last. "Your words make no sense to my people, yet I find I cannot ignore them. You will remain alive, for now. I will hear more of the strength you call kindness." The guards exchanged startled glances, but they obeyed when she waved them to take him back. As Rian was led away, Sarachna returned to her throne. She rested her chin upon her hand, deep in thought. Her people had ruled by fear and power for generations. Never had she considered another way. But now, because of one quiet human, she felt the first stirrings of doubt. That night, the queen walked the halls alone. She passed by her warriors training with blades, their shouts echoing through steel walls. She passed workers carrying heavy loads. Eyes lowered in silence, none smiled, none spoke with joy. Everything was discipline, obedience, strength. But for the first time, Sarachna wondered if something was missing, and in the silence of her worship, she admitted to herself a truth she would never speak aloud. The human had planted a question in her mind, one she could not yet Answer: life aboard the Varai warship was never still. Warriors trained, workers toiled. And the air always carried the clash of steel and the thrum of engines. Yet one day, the silence broke with shouts of excitement. The arena would open. The Varai loved contests of strength. Their warriors fought not only enemies, but also wild creatures gathered from distant worlds. These battles were not just entertainment, they were tests of honor. Proof of who was strong enough to lead. Prisoners were sometimes thrown in as sport, their deaths fueling the crowd's laughter. This time, the chosen prisoner was Rian. Two guards dragged him toward the massive steel doors. Chains rattled around his wrists, though lightly, for they expected little from him. They mocked him as they walked. Fragile human will not last a breath, one said. Perhaps he will make the beast laugh before he is crushed, the other added. Rian said nothing. His heart beat fast, but his steps did not falter. Fear would not help him now. Inside the arena, the sound of thousands of armored feet and deep voices thundered like a storm. The circular pit was surrounded by towering stands, filled with Varai warriors, their eyes glowing in the dim light. At the highest seat sat Queen Serikna, her armor gleaming, her gaze sharp as a blade. When the gates closed behind him, Rian stood alone on the sandy ground. Across from him, another gate rose with a growl of machinery. From the shadows stepped the creatures, low to the ground, their bodies covered with rough scales. Their eyes burned red, and their jaws dripped with saliva. They were bred for battle. Beasts meant to tear apart anything weaker than a Varai warrior. The crowd roared, shouting for blood. The beast lunged forward, claws tearing into the sand. Rian's breath caught, but instead of running, he raised his arms slowly, making himself appear calm. His mind worked quickly. He could not fight them with strength. To struggle as the Varai wanted would mean certain death. The first beast rushed at him, jaws wide. Rian stepped aside at the last moment, rolling across the sand. The crowd laughed at his clumsy movement, thinking it cowardly. But Rian rose quickly, eyes never leaving the creatures. The second beast snarled and slashed its claws. Again, Rian dodged, stumbling, but keeping distance. He noticed something: the creatures were not wild rage. They moved with hunger and pain, chained to this cruel game. They were not his true enemies. When one beast stumbled, Rian saw his chance instead of striking. He knelt low, voice calm though his heart raced. Easy, he whispered, extending his hand. I will not harm you. The beast hissed, teeth inches from his face. The crowd shouted with laughter, waiting for blood. But instead of biting, the creature hesitated. Something in Rian's calm voice, something in his steady eyes, slowed its fury. The second beast circled, ready to strike again. Rian quickly moved between them, raising both hands. Not enemies, he said softly. Not enemies. Minutes passed like ours. The crowd grew restless. They had expected screams and blood, but instead they saw a fragile human standing still, refusing to fight. Some shouted insults, others demanded the beast's attack. But then, the first creature lowered its head. It gave a deep growl, not of rage, but of recognition. Slowly, it stepped back. The second followed, confused but unwilling to strike. While the first had calmed, gasps spread through the stands. No prisoner had ever tamed the arena beasts. No one had dared meet their fury with peace. On her throne, Queen Serikna's eyes widened. She had expected the human to die quickly, perhaps bravely. But she had not expected this: mercy in the face of death, kindness in the heart of the arena. Her warriors, raised on cruelty, now stared in uneasy silence. Rian stood tall, though his body trembled from fear and exhaustion. He turned his gaze toward the queen's high seat. He did not bow. He did not raise his fist in victory. He only looked at her with calm, as if to say, "There's another way." The crowd fell into whispers. Some muttered that the beasts were weak. Others, though, felt something they had not in years: respect for a prisoner. At last, Serikna rose to her feet. Her voice carried across the arena, sharp and commanding. Enough. The beasts were drawn back through their gates, chains clinking. Rian was taken by the guards. But the arena did not roar in laughter as usual. Instead, The air was heavy, uncertain. As he was led away, Rian glanced once more at the queen. Her golden eyes were fixed on him, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous, curiosity mixed with respect. In her heart, Queen Serikna admitted a truth she could no longer deny. The human's strange strength was beginning to shake the very foundation of her people's beliefs. The arena incident did not fade quickly. Whispers spread through the Varai warship like smoke through narrow halls. The human had not fought, yet he had lived. The beast had not slain him, yet he had stood unharmed. Some called it trickery, others called it weakness, but a few began to wonder if it was something else entirely. Queen Serikna heard the whispers. She pretended not to care, yet the memory of Rian's calm gaze lingered in her thoughts. When she summoned him again, it was not to test his strength, but to test his mind. The throne chamber was quieter than usual. Only a few guards stood near the doors. Serikna leaned forward on her throne, her golden eyes sharp. "You shamed my warriors," she said at last. "They expected blood, but you gave them silence. Do you know what they call you now?" Rian stood calmly in his chains. "Perhaps many things. None of them matter." Her lips curved in a small smile. "They call you the weak survivor. Yet they speak of you more than they speak of their victories. Tell me, human, why did you refuse to strike the beasts?" "They were not my enemies," Rian replied simply. "They were only suffering. Killing them would not prove anything." His words unsettled her again. Vorai's strength had always been measured by blood spilled. Yet here was a human who claimed strength was found in sparing life. She narrowed her eyes. "Do you call yourself brave, then?" "No," Rian answered. "I only did what felt right." Silence stretched between them. The queen expected flattery, excuses, or fear. Instead, he always gave her plain truth. It irritated her, yet it also drew her closer. In the days that followed, she began summoning him more often. Sometimes she asked questions of his people, how humans built their homes, how they survived despite being weaker than many races. Other times, she asked nothing at all, letting silence sit between them as if to see how long he would endure. Rian never begged for freedom. He never asked for mercy. He spoke with honesty, not with trembling. And the queen found herself listening more than she expected. But not all Varai shared her interest. In the shadows of the warship, some generals began to murmur. They had seen the queen call the human often, had seen her eyes linger too long. To them, this was weakness. The queen who once crushed entire fleets now listened to a fragile prisoner. Such a thing was dangerous. One evening, as Serikna left the chamber after speaking with Rian, two of her oldest generals walked beside her. Their armor was dark, their faces grim. "My queen." One began carefully. "The soldiers grow restless. They wonder why you waste time on creatures so frail. It makes them uneasy." "Uneasy?" Serikna asked, her voice cold. "They think the human clouds your judgment." The other continued. "He is no warrior. He does not deserve your gaze. If he remains, he will weaken our spirit." The queen stopped walking. Her golden eyes burned as she turned toward them. "Do you question my strength?" The generals bowed low, though their jaws tightened. "Never, my queen. But we warn you the human is dangerous, not because of his power, but because of the doubt he sows." Serikna said nothing more. She dismissed them with a wave. But their words echoed in her mind. Later that night, she stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. For the first time in many years, she wondered if her rule was as unshakable as it had once been. The human's words had planted questions she could not silence, and now those questions were spreading among her warriors. In his cell, Rian sat quietly, unaware of the storm building around him. He only remembered the look in Serikna's eyes when she listened, sharp, thoughtful, almost searching. He wondered if perhaps, beneath her steel and fire, there was someone who longed for more than endless war. The next day, when she summoned him again, her voice was sharper. "Do you know what danger you bring, human?" she asked. "Your words spread. My warriors grow restless. Some whisper that I am changing, that I grow weak. What say you?" Rian met her gaze calmly. "If a few words from me can shake them, Perhaps their strength was never as solid as they believed. Her eyes narrowed, but she did not strike him. Instead, she leaned closer. And what of me? Do you believe I grow weak because I listen to you? Rian held her gaze. No, listening is not weakness. It is strength. Only the strongest can question themselves. For a long time, she was silent. Then, for the first time in her reign, Queen Serikna dismissed her guards and sat in silence with a human, speaking not as ruler to prisoner, but as one mind-seeking. Another, but outside her chamber, shadows grew longer. The generals who feared change now whispered of rebellion. They believed the queen was no longer the unbreakable conqueror she once was. And in their hearts, the seeds of betrayal began to grow. The warship drifted through endless space, its halls filled with the sound of marching feet and steel striking steel. To most, it was as unshakable as a mountain, but beneath its iron discipline, cracks were forming. The whispers of the generals had turned into secret meetings. In hidden chambers, away from the queen's eyes, they gathered, their faces grim and their voices low. She listens too much to the human, one muttered. She asks questions instead of giving orders, another growled. She grows soft. If she continues, the Varai will lose their fire. The oldest among them slammed a fist against the table. Then we act. The queen forgets her duty. If she will not lead with strength, we will take her throne. None spoke of honor, for in their hearts they feared what they could not understand. And Rian had become the spark for that fear. That same day, Rian was guided through the warship. By two guards, he noticed something different eyes on him wherever he walked. Warriors who once mocked him now stared with unreadable expressions. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with anger. The whispers had reached them too. When he was brought before Queen Serikna, she stood in the center of her throne chamber instead of sitting. Her armor was fastened, her blade resting at her side. Her golden eyes burned brighter than usual. "There's unrest," she said without pretense. "My generals question me. They question my strength. And they blame you?" Rian bowed his head slightly. "Then perhaps I should not remain here." Her voice sharpened. "No, you will remain. You are not the cause of their weakness, they are. But know this. Human, their whispers may soon turn to blades." Rian studied her face. For the first time, he saw more than a queen of steel. He saw a woman burdened with the weight of a throne. Surrounded by enemies wearing the faces of allies, the betrayal came faster than either expected. That night, the alarms of the warship rang through its halls. The sharp sound of clashing steel echoed from the queen's wing. Shadows moved swiftly, Varai generals with their loyal soldiers, storming toward the throne chamber. Serikna was ready. Her blade gleamed as she met them at the great doors, her golden eyes filled with fire. The generals shouted accusations. "You have grown weak. You have betrayed the Varai way. You will fall, and a stronger hand will rule." The clash was brutal. Steel rang, sparks flew, and the chamber filled with the roar of warriors. Rian, left unguarded in the chaos, stood at the side of the hall. He could have run. The outer gates were unguarded now. Escape was within reach. But instead, he looked at Serikna, standing alone against a tide of traitors. For reasons he did not fully understand, his feet moved toward her, not away. A general lunged at her from behind, blade raised. Rian shouted a warning and threw himself forward, shoving the strike aside with the chain still locked to his wrists. The blade cut his arm, but it spared the queen. For a moment, Serikna stared at him, shocked. A prisoner had risked himself to protect her. Human, she breathed, then turned her fury on the traitors. Together, though unevenly matched, they fought side by side. She was a storm of steel, cutting through armored generals. Rian could not match her strength, but he moved with quick courage, shoving weapons aside, striking with chains, distracting foes till the queen's blade could find its mark. The chamber floor grew littered with broken armor. The traitors fell one by one, until silence returned. Serikna stood tall, her armor dented, her breathing heavy. Rian leaned against a pillar, blood on his sleeve but still alive. Their eyes met. In that glance, something unspoken passed between them, a bond forged not of conquest, but of trust. The surviving warriors knelt before their queen. Their heads bowed. The rebellion had failed, but the memory of what they had seen could not be erased. A human standing at their queen's side, fighting with courage that rivaled any Varai. Later, in the quiet after the storm, Serikna approached Rien. She looked down at the wound on his arm, her golden eyes softer than he had ever seen. "You had a chance to flee," she said slowly, "yet you stayed. Why?" Rien met her gaze. "Because you were not my enemy, and because no one should stand alone." For the first time in her reign, Queen Serikna felt her chest tighten not with anger, but with something she could not name. "You are a strange creature, human," she whispered, "and perhaps the strongest one I have ever met." But outside the chamber, in the far corners of the warship, whispers still moved like poison. The rebellion had failed, but doubt remained. The Varai had seen their queen fight with a human at her side, and the question that haunted them all was the same one now haunting her. Was kindness a strength greater than conquest? Tom lived a simple life. He was a student who liked reading science books and playing games on his old computer. His days were quiet, and his nights were even quieter. He never expected anything unusual to happen in his small apartment near the university. But everything began to change when he got a new roommate. Her name was Mira. Tom first met her through a short notice on the university board. It simply said, "Looking for a place, quiet, pays on time." There was nothing strange in that message, but when Tom met her, he felt something he could not explain. Mira looked almost human, but not completely. Her skin was pale in a way that did not seem unhealthy, but rather unusual, like the color of moonlight. Her eyes were a deep teal blue, brighter than any eyes Tom had ever seen. She always wore simple clothes, loose shirts, and long sleeves, even when the weather was warm. She spoke softly, carefully, as though she had to think before choosing each word. Tom did not ask too many questions. He needed help with rent, and she seemed kind enough. She moved in the very next day, carrying only one small bag. That was strange to most students, brought many boxes. But Mira had almost nothing. At first, living with her felt ordinary. Mira kept to herself, spending hours sitting quietly in her room. Sometimes, Tom would hear faint sounds, like a low hum, coming from behind her door. When he asked if she was playing music, she simply smiled and said, "Just studying." Tom noticed she hardly ate normal food. She would sit with him at the table, but only take a few bites of fruit or drink water. When Tom asked about it, she said her stomach was weak and she could not eat heavy meals. He accepted her answer, but inside, his curiosity grew. The more he watched Mira, the more unusual she seemed. She always locked her room when she left, even if she was only stepping outside for a few minutes. At night, Tom sometimes heard her walking around the living room, whispering words in a language he could not understand. He thought she might be from a faraway country, but still, nothing about her matched the people he knew. Despite all the strangeness, Mira was polite and even gentle. She once helped Tom fix a broken lamp by touching the wires in a way that seemed skilled for someone who had never seen it before. Another time, when Tom cut his hand while cooking, she pressed her fingers gently on the wound, and the bleeding stopped almost instantly. Tom wanted to ask how she did that, but when he opened his mouth, her eyes met his with a look that made him stay silent. Still, Tom was not afraid of her. If anything, he felt a quiet respect. Mira carried herself as though she had lived through things much larger than the small world of their apartment. She had a presence that was hard to describe, calm, yet heavy, like someone holding deep secrets. One evening, Tom found himself staring at the night sky from the balcony. The stars looked clear above the city lights. Mira stepped outside too, and for the first time, she spoke more than a few words. "You humans look at the sky," she said softly, "always searching. Do you ever think someone might be looking back?" Tom laughed nervously. "Of course, I mean, people say the universe is too big for us to be alone." Mira smiled faintly, but her smile was not the smile of someone joking. It was the smile of someone who knew more than she could say. Tom felt a chill, though the night air was warm. He wondered if Mira had lived under the same sky but with a very different story. That night, as he lay in bed, Tom thought about all the strange things he had noticed. He told himself it was nothing, that Mira was just a shy student with odd habits, but deep down, he knew she was not like anyone else. The apartment felt different since she arrived. The silence of the rooms was no longer empty. It carried a quiet energy. Tom could not explain it, but it was as if he had stepped into a bigger world without realizing it. He closed his eyes, unaware that his life had already changed for Mira. This apartment was not only a place to live, it was a hiding place. And soon, Tom would learn that his unusual roommate was hiding far more than he could imagine.